The moment everyone said would never come arrived, not with a formal declaration, not with an ultimatum delivered through diplomatic channels, but with American sailors boarding an Iranian cargo vessel at gunpoint in the Gulf of Oman. On April 19, 2026, the United States Navy intercepted, fired upon, and seized an Iranian-flagged ship in international waters. Trump announced the seizure himself, and in the same post renewed his threat to destroy Iran's energy infrastructure if no deal is reached. The Dow Jones shed 358 points before the U.S. market opened. Brent crude held above $100 per barrel. Tehran announced it would not send a delegation to the scheduled peace talks in Pakistan while the American blockade remained in place. In 48 hours, the most consequential diplomatic window since the crisis began had collapsed. And the Strait of Hormuz, closed since March 4th, holding 20% of the world's daily oil supply in suspension, showed no sign of opening. To understand the weight of what happened on April 19th, begin at the beginning. On March 4, 2026, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy formally declared the Strait of Hormuz closed to commercial tanker traffic. The strait, 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, is the single passage through which an estimated 20 million barrels of oil and 19% of the world's liquefied natural gas move every day. When it closed, the International Energy Agency characterized the disruption as the largest single choke point event in the history of the global oil market. Brent crude crossed $100 per barrel on March 12th, the first time since August 2022. Iran's asymmetric naval closure architecture had been positioned, tested in live fire exercises, and held in operational readiness for exactly this order. IRGC fast attack craft swarmed the approaches at Bandar Abbas. Submarine-deployed mines seeded the northern passage near Qeshm Island. Kamikaze surface drones from Larak Island patrolled the tanker lanes. When the order came, it executed without degradation. The United States responded with a naval blockade corridor in the Gulf of Oman, carrier strike groups, P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, and destroyer-led interdiction patrols authorized to stop vessels suspected of carrying Iranian crude or weapons transfers. On April 8th, a 15-day ceasefire entered force. That ceasefire produced a 3-page draft memorandum. The United States would release $20 billion in frozen Iranian sovereign assets. Iran would surrender its enriched nuclear stockpiles to a third-party custodian. Neither side signed. Both sides sent representatives to talk. On April 19th, the U.S. Navy seized an Iranian cargo ship. The talks stopped. The seized vessel was intercepted approximately 60 nautical miles southeast of the strait entrance. U.S. naval sources cited unspecified intelligence, the same classification language used 11 days earlier when U.S. Southern Command filmed the destruction of a Caribbean narco vessel, killing 3. The operational pattern is deliberate: cite intelligence, provide footage, make the action undeniable. Iran's state media called it piracy. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Saeed Khatibzadeh confirmed Tehran was formally suspending its delegation to Islamabad. The machinery of the ceasefire stopped producing outcomes and began producing incidents. Picture this. You are the Iranian commander overseeing naval operations from Bandar Abbas. Your fast attack flotilla controls the northern approaches. Your mines hold the central passage in denied access. Your drones respond to targets of opportunity. For 46 days, the strait has been closed, and no combination of U.S. carrier power, diplomatic pressure, and economic leverage has reopened it. The ceasefire gave your government a window. And then, 60 nautical miles to the southeast, an American boarding crew walks onto one of your sovereign vessels, takes it at gunpoint, and your foreign ministry calls it piracy. The crew is in U.S. custody. The ship is in U.S. custody. What is the order you give next? Saudi Arabia activated its 200-kilometer east-west pipeline on March 4th, the same day the strait closed, pumping a record 7 million barrels per day to the Red Sea port of Yanbu, the highest throughput in the pipeline's 45-year history. Without that bypass, the energy shock would have been immediately catastrophic. 7 million barrels per day is 35% of normal strait throughput. The other 65%, 13 million barrels, has nowhere to go. The Houthis formalized their Iranian alliance on March 28 and simultaneously reopened the second front. Bab-el-Mandeb, 30 kilometers wide between Yemen and Djibouti, came under renewed missile and drone pressure. The port of Yanbu, now carrying redirected Saudi crude, sits 400 kilometers north of the Houthi primary launch zones. The bypass that prevented catastrophe became a target. This is Iran's strategic logic, not one choke point. 2. Every additional front divides available force structure. That is not a coincidence. It is doctrine. Trump's communications operate on a fixed pattern. Easter Sunday, April 12th, he threatened to bomb Iranian energy infrastructure if the strait was not reopened. April 19th, the same threat issued alongside the seizure announcement. Each iteration that passes without a U.S. strike either validates the threat as credible deterrence or confirms it as theater. Tehran reads the pattern daily. The gap between threat and action is the only space where diplomacy still operates. The seizure of an Iranian vessel narrowed that gap to something measurable in hours, not days. The Dow Jones losing 358 points in a single pre-market session on news of one cargo ship encodes the market's precise assessment. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq had just printed all-time highs the previous week, built on the assumption that the ceasefire would hold. When the seizure landed, that assumption reversed in one session. Estimated market capitalization erased between midnight and the opening bell, approximately $1.4 trillion. Iran's residual leverage is real, specific, and structural. Its nuclear program was degraded in April strikes. Its air force is operationally negligible. Pre-sanctions American airframes from the 1970s, an estimated 50 to 60% non-airworthy before the crisis began. What Iran retains is the Strait itself and the Houthi alliance pressing the Red Sea simultaneously. The cost asymmetry defining this confrontation is the most extreme in any current theater. Approximately $180 million per year maintains the IRGCN fast attack, mine and drone architecture that closed the strait. Approximately $6.4 billion per year funds U.S. carrier strike group operations in the Persian Gulf. The world's most expensive offensive naval force is being held in positional stalemate by something that costs less than 3% of one carrier group to sustain. The domino chain runs predictably. Iran refuses Pakistan talks while the blockade holds. The blockade holds because Washington demands a nuclear concession. Iran will not surrender stockpiles without the $20 billion asset release. The asset release cannot move while Iran refuses to negotiate. The strait stays closed. The Houthis hold the Red Sea. Qatar, hosting Al Udeid Air Base and supplying 25% of Europe's liquefied natural gas through Hormuz-adjacent terminals, says nothing publicly. It has only the position of maximum silence, which is itself a position with an expiration date. Pakistan cannot mediate between a party that is present and a party that has announced its absence. If the framework collapses, the next iteration of this confrontation will not begin with a draft memorandum. It will begin with the next seizure, or a U.S. strike on an Iranian energy facility, or the moment one of the mines seeding the northern strait approaches makes contact with something it was not supposed to find. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide. At its current state, it is functionally impassable. 20 million barrels of oil per day are waiting on the other side, and the only path through it runs through a conversation that, as of April 19, 2026, one side has refused to continue. What do you think about the U.S. seizure of the Iranian cargo ship? Does this force Iran back to the table in Pakistan, or does it lock in an escalation neither side has a plan to reverse? Drop your answer in the comments. If you want more briefings like this, subscribe and hit the bell. We cover every major move before the mainstream catches up.